Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Assalatu wassalamu ala anbiya'il mursalin. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina Muhammad fatil lima khuliq wal khatil lima sabaq. Nasrul haq bihaq wa hadi ila siratal mustaqim wa ala alihi aqdaril azim. Alhamdulillah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh everyone. May peace be upon you wherever you are, together with your family and friends. We pray for your well-being and good state of iman, inshallah, in these difficult times. Welcome to Sud Ilahi Sacred Night of Dars with Shaykh Aziz Fredericks. Alhamdulillah, before we get into the Dars, I'd just like to say a few words or maybe just informing you about Shaykh Aziz bio. Shaykh Aziz Ahmad Fredericks was born in Nottingham in United Kingdom, where he completed schooling before moving to Leicester for university study. He completed a BEd degree in a primary education, specializing in language arts. He then went on to carry out postgraduate study in education in various universities, including London University Institute of Education, Starlight University, and the Open University. He also did research at the School of Oriental and African Study. She has published a number of articles on education, designed the curriculum of Islamia School London. At the time, it achieved voluntary aided status. Right. He also edited many books on Islam, including several under the direct supervision of his teacher, like Fatul Gulen. He has also worked as a teacher, head teacher, and school principal in England, Scotland, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, and USA as educational consultant. He has worked on projects in Turkey, Yemen, Kenya, Jordan, and South Africa. He also has a special interest in special education needs and additional support, and currently work additional support for local education authority. Uh, One of his teacher, as we known prominently, is Habib Mashur Al-Haddad, who he studied in Jeddah for many years, and also he studied with Sheikh Abdul Rahman Al-Kitani in Kenya. She also had translated a lot of important books in our traditional, such as Risalah to Jamia by Habib Ahmad bin Zain Al-Habshi, the 40 Hadith, Quran by Mullah Ali Kari, and the famous Nasihat Dunia by Habib Abdullah Haddad, and also another one that we know today, Educating the Children, Riyadu Sibian of Imam Ramli. So, mashallah, what an honor and blessing that we have tonight to learn from someone who has a very vast experience in teaching and also inheriting prophetic knowledge from his teacher. So, without further ado, I'd like to invite Syed Abdul to start the DAS, which is the 40 principle of the Deen from Ihya Ulumuddin by Imam Ghazali. Tafadhal ya Sheikh. And if you have, sorry, I forgot to say, if you have any question for this online class, you can text me at 906-87106. Shukran, Safwan. Thank you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. نويت التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والفائدة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير والابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته بقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله وصحبه حق قدره ومقدار العظيم. Alhamdulillah, thank you to Khalid, my good friend and brother in Singapore, for allowing me to teach this class and honoring me with this opportunity. He chose for us to look at a book called the Arba'in, or the 40 Principles of the Religion. And this is the English translation of the book, if people have a interest in referring to it. A little bit about the book. Of course, it's written by Imam Al-Ghazali, who was a great scholar. Originally, he'd worked in effect for the state, for the Islamic leadership, and was very famous in the courts of the rulers. And at some point, he had reached almost the peak of his intellectual career, defeating people in debates, having thousands and thousands of students attending his classes. And then he went through a kind of crisis, or Allah put him through a test where he actually, in the middle of his teaching, was unable to communicate, was unable to speak. And then he realized that there was something that was missing, so to speak, from his life and from his status. This status was perhaps not conducive to his inner peace. So at this, he left his role and then went to travel and left the high position that he had, and traveled around the Muslim world, first of all going to Asham, from Iraq to Asham to Syria, and then on to do Hajj. And then on the return, he came back refreshed and in a position to start to revive the knowledge that he already had. And as a result of this, he then rewrote, so to speak, his knowledge in a concise text. Although I say concise, it's a magnificent, enormous piece of work, which is called Ihya Ulumuddin, the bringing to life of the sciences of this religion. And that's important to reflect on the position that he was in and how he got to the point of writing Ihya Ulumuddin. Interestingly, while he was in Asham, in the Holy Land of Syria, Palestine, he was actually working as a cleaner for a point in incognito, so nobody knew who he was. And somebody was teaching one of his books and was making regular mistakes and was not quite there. He went up and says, "Oh, by the way, I think this means this." And the man turned to him and says, "Who do you think you are, Imam Al-Ghazali?" And of course, this showed the status of Imam Al-Ghazali, and the state that he was in at that point was that he'd left that world of knowledge to seek a world of spirituality in which the knowledge had life. And that's why the book is so important in terms of Ihya Ulumuddin, bringing to life this knowledge. So the title is the summary of the Ihya Ulumuddin, and it contains 40 principles based around 40 chapters, the 40 books of Imam Al-Ghazali's Ihya. And the Ihya is broken down into four sections on worship. The first quarter is on worship. The second quarter is on interacting between people. The third quarter is about the things that will destroy you, al-muhlikat, the vices, the things like greed and anger. And then finally, the last quarter is about dealing with how you can save yourself from those destructive forces. That's called the Ruba al-Munjiat, those things that save you. Now, the 40 principles that we're going to be referring to today have the first quarter, part one, is on knowledge. The second is about outward actions. The second quarter, that's 10 and 10. And then the third and fourth are like the Ihya Ulumuddin, on those that destroy you, the blameworthy characteristics, and finally the praiseworthy characteristics. So this chapter that we're going to be studying today is, and probably next week, because I think it'd be difficult to cover it in one session, is on fasting. So the outward actions starts with prayer, and then zakat, and then the third of these chapters, a third of these principles, is on fasting. So the third principle of this second section is called the section on fasting, al-asl al-thalith fi siyam, and they're very short sections. Very short. In the English translation, it's just 2 pages, and I'll try and expand on a few of the points. Now, the most important thing is to understand the title, and you forgive me for stressing this, but because I believe if you understand the word siyam or saum, fasting, puasa in Malay, or roza in Urdu, if you understand this principle, this concept, then you'll understand the rest of the chapter. And I think it's very, very important that we reflect and understand this word first. And if that's all we cover in this one session, then inshallah that should be sufficient. But hopefully we'll cover more than that. So the word siyam or saum actually means to hold back, to abstain, to restrain from something. Another meaning of saum is imsak. Imsak, and also you'll find this word used on the calendars. So sometimes at the beginning you'll see imsak, meaning the time at which you stop eating and fasting. But the concept of imsak, of holding back, is very, very important, because this is the principle of fasting, is to hold back from something. And if you understand this concept, then you'll understand why the fast, the legal understanding of fasting uh, is how it manifested in that you imsak an shay, you hold back from eating, you hold back from drinking, you hold back from physical relations with your spouse, you hold back. But the concept that we're talking about is this holding back, and that's really, really important to understand this. And for that reason, in this lesson, through this book from Ihya Ulumuddin, you won't get the rules of fasting. So I'm not going to be addressing the question of whether you can use toothpaste during Ramadan, or whether you start fasting when it's 15 degrees below the sunrise or 18 degrees. That's not what this is about. This is about the principles of fasting. So let's look at the word psalms, to hold back. When it's used in the Quran, there's one of the best examples where it's used in the Quran is Inni Nadhart Sayyidatuna Maryam, Mary, the mother of Jesus, when she it has the Immaculate Conception, when she conceives of Sayyidina Isa, the Prophet Jesus. Of course, this is the Immaculate Conception. She receives this through the angel, and as a result, she becomes pregnant and she gives birth. And to understand the Immaculate Conception, that there's no father to this child. They were She's obviously going to be accused, and that's what they were. They came to her, tahmilu, as the Quran says, to accuse her. And then she's instructed to tell them, Inni nadhartu lirrahmani sawman. I have made an oath, to indicate to them, I have made an oath to the most merciful, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to do sawm. And this word sawm here is the word that we're using in this book, that I'm going to do a sawm, I'm going to hold back. So the psalm here is holding back from responding, holding back from speaking, in fact, because the clarity of this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَمْ أُكَلِّمَ الْيَوْمَ إِنسِيًّا, that what she meant by this, on this day, I will not speak to any human being. So when they came, so let's put that in its wider context. And also maybe bring it into a more modern situation, a more relevant situation that we might be able to relate to better. Over and over again, we are being accused, we're being attacked, we're being abused for our principles, by our faith, our dress, our color, our beliefs. And many of us naturally want to respond by, as Khalid said, I was brought up in a rough area in Nottingham, and the natural response is to punch somebody. But rather than do that, what we should do, we should remember what the concept of sawm is to hold back. So rather than punch the first person that insults me, I hold back, and you feel to yourself, Inni nadartu lirrahmani sawman. I am going to do sawm. I'm going to hold back from punching him, and rather I'm going to act in a way which is befitting of a human being, befitting of a Muslim, befitting of the one who has this relationship with his Lord. So the idea of sawm is to hold back from something and to rise above those lower instincts. So it's about holding back, and just to look at so that's how we should be acting in this way. And when we do fast, inshallah, in the month of Ramadan, when the month does come, and somebody comes to argue with us, the Prophet ﷺ says that you should respond by saying, Inni sa'im, inni sa'im. You should say, I am doing so, I am fasting. Inni sa'im, I am one who is fasting. I am one that is holding back. So he comes to argue with you, and you say, Inni sa'im, inni sa'im. And this is interesting because the hadith mentions twice. Usually the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he wants to do something for emphasis, he says it 3 times. Do this, and he says it 3 times. However, he says it twice in this occasion. And there's a reason for this. Why? When you say inni sa'im, what it means is, first of all, you say to yourself, Inni sa'im, I am indeed fasting. And then you say to the other person who's coming to argue with you, Inni sa'im. that I am holding back, I am fasting. And here the concept that's being emphasized is not the fact that you're doing without food, you're doing without water, you're doing without physical relationships with your spouse. What you're saying is, I'm holding back. So the concept of holding back is really what's interesting, or what's being addressed here. And what is interesting is that in many ways we have already started our psalm, and alhamdulillah, Allah has blessed us by giving us this situation of coronavirus, which has now locked us down. Why do I say that that's as a blessing? Is because the meaning of the word psalm is to restrain, to hold back from things. Let's look at how it's used in the Arabic language. We say Sama anil sayr, that he held back or he abstained from travel. And that sentence applies to many of us. Last week, alhamdulillah, I had intended to visit my brothers in Sweden, and we were planning to hold a retreat, a camp, to address look at some hadith, etc. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala held us back, and we weren't able to do that. The month of Ramadan is coming. I was hoping to spend some of that with friends and family in Africa, and that's not going to happen. So we've already been held back. So this wasam and isayr means to hold back from something. We also say that the sun and the wind and the water, they do soul. So we say sa'amat al-rih is when the wind becomes calm. Sa'amat al-rih is the wind did soul. Sa'amat al-ma' means it stopped flowing, it stopped running, and it came to stillness. So that's interesting. Why the reason I'm emphasizing this is because that concept of soul is about coming to this point of calmness. So the purpose of the fast, the purpose of the psalm, the chapter that we're going to be addressing in this dars, is about finding that peace, finding that calmness through restraint. And so it's not about eating or drinking, or not eating or not drinking. And many people ask me, alhamdulillah, many people who are unable to do the fast of not eating and not drinking. Many diabetics have asked, and Sarah, she because of her physical condition, she's not able to fast. A good friend of mine who recently had a heart attack, Allah give him shifa and afia, he asked me about fasting. I says, don't. He says, and he couldn't get this idea of, no, he has to fast. He's fasted all his life. Why would he not fast now? He says, no, don't, because the doctors have said that you need to take medicine at specific times to keep the flow of the blood regular, to keep the heartbeat regular. And therefore, if they say you take these medicine every 6 hours, don't you change it round and say, well, I'm going to take it 2 in the night and none in the day. No, there's a reason for it. Wait until the fast gets shorter and you're able to do it in accordance. So, alhamdulillah, the question here is, can they still do Psalm? Of course they can. Of course they can still do Psalm. They can't fast in the Sharia sense of going without food from this point until this point, but they can still do Psalm. Is to learn to restrain, to benefit from the month by getting this concept of Siyam. So, and that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in a hadith Qudsi, in a famous narration, which comes from the words of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is actually divine. It came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who told him, or through Jibril inspired these words in him, where Allah says, As-sawmu li wa ana ajzi biha. Fasting is mine and I reward it. What's meant by this is that He knows when somebody's doing soul. Because some people might be going without food and water, but they're not restraining themselves. But we'll come to that later. And when I was reading a little bit on the word psalm, I came across in hadith, which is mentioned in the dictionary I was looking at, which is Lisan al-Arab. And therefore, because it's a dictionary and not a book of hadith, I don't know the authenticity of the hadith. He mentions in the Lisan al-Arab a hadith where he says, the Prophet ﷺ says, Laysa fi sawm riya. Like I say, I'm not, this is where its source is, but what it means is there is no ostentation, there is no showing off in fast. What does this mean? Is that actually you can't show off by fasting. You can't say, by the way, I'm fasting. It doesn't happen like that, because the soul is something which is inside you. The holding back is something which is inside you. Even this holding back that I referred to earlier, that we're all being faced with. We're not able to go to the mosque. We're not able to perform the Jum'ah. We're not able to travel for dawah. We're not able to travel for visiting Silat Rahim, for keeping family ties. We're not able to do this. Are we doing so, or are we being imprisoned? It depends. It depends on you. If you are patiently accepting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put you into this state, and that you know that as a result of fulfilling the duties to humankind or the rest of humanity, by holding back from going out, holding back from perhaps we can stop the spread of this virus, or slow down the spread of this virus, so that we can save more people's lives. As a result of this, I'm staying at my house, and as a result, I'm content with Allah's will. If you are feeling that, then you're doing so. You're not imprisoned. You're willfully accepting Allah's plan and holding back from doing things which could harm other people. So you're doing so. So I'm doing, inshallah, doing so by being locked in my house. So and so may not be doing so by being locked in their house. They're just being imprisoned. So this is the difference. It's an internal action. It's something which is internal. Something that you see you can't see. It's within you. So anyway, that's the chapter. So it says Al-Asl Thalith Siyam. Perhaps I should be referring to the English text, just to prove that I am using the right book, because I want Khalid to be angry with me. So the book says, the third principle, fasting, as-siyam. And then it goes on to mention two hadith. And these two hadith are it's interesting he chooses these two hadith. He could have chosen any hadith. And my first observation was that if I was to write a book on fasting, which I'll never be able to, and why would I want to when we've got the great books like this, I probably wouldn't have chosen the two hadith that he chose. I would have chosen one of the other hadith which are well known. For example, where the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Ramadan ila Ramadan, wal Jum'ah ila Jum'ah, wal Salah ila Salah, mukaffarat lima baynihunna idha ijtanabat al-kaba'ir," which is related by Imam Muslim. The meaning of which is from Ramadan to the Ramadan, and from Jum'ah, Friday, to Jum'ah, to Friday, was Salah ila Salah, meaning of Dhuhr to Maghrib, Dhuhr to Asr, Asr to Maghrib, from each prayer to preach, mukaffarat lima baynihinna, covers up the minor sins that are committed between them, ishtanabat al-kaba'ir, kaba'ir, as long as you don't do the major things, you don't go around killing people and things like that. So that's one hadith. Another hadith I might have used was when the Prophet ﷺ was asked about the month of Ramadan. He says, "Huwa shahr sabr," it's the month of steadfastness, it's the month of patience. Was sabr thawabuhu al-jannah, and the reward of sabr is the garden. Or the other famous hadith which many people will be quoting, awwalahu rahmah, the beginning of this month of Ramadan is rahmah, is mercy. Wa awsatahu maghfirah, and the middle of it is forgiveness. وآخره إتق من النار, and the end of it, the last third of it, is freedom from the fire. Or finally, I would have maybe mentioned where Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was instructed by Jibril to climb up the steps of his mimbar, and he says on each step he said a different things. On one of the steps is Man adraka Ramadan falam yughfir lahu ab'ad Allah kul ameen, and so Jibril said to him, whoever reaches the month of Ramadan and he is not forgiven, may Allah distance him. And then he said to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, say Ameen. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said Ameen. So these are some of the hadith I might have used if I was to be writing, to be giving a dars on this hadith, on the month of Ramadan. But Imam Al-Ghazali didn't use these. He used two very specific hadith, and these are the ones that I want to relate. So again, I'll read from the Arabic first. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول الله سبحانه وتعالى كل حسنة بعشر أمثالها إلى 700 ضعف إلا الصيام فإنه لي وأنا أجزي به. وقال عليه الصلاة والسلام لكل شيء باب وباب العبادة الصوم. And I'll read the translation again from the book that we're studying. Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, every good deed is rewarded with 10 of its like, multiplied by up to 700, except fasting. For verily it is for me, and I reward it directly. He, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, also said, everything has a gate, and the gate of worship is fasting. So let's just look at these two hadith. The first one is about what we would call nisbah ilallah, attributing something to Allah. Now everything belongs to Allah. Everything belongs to Allah. So every house, lillahi ma fi samawati wa ma fil ard. Everything belongs to Allah. So therefore, my house in Glasgow, my small flat in not far from the Ibrox Stadium, this tiny flat belongs to Allah. Everything belongs to Allah. But nobody will say, my little flat is the house of Allah. Because that's when I say house of Allah, it's not appropriate to say the house of Allah. I live in the house of Allah. Of course I live in the house of everybody. Everything so belongs to Allah. So why do we, when we say house of Allah, what are we referring to? Of course we're referring to the Kaaba, to the holy house in Mecca. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala attributes that house in particular tashrifan, to honor that house. And likewise the fast, he honors it by attributing it to him. Everything belongs to him. So why is this attributing it to him so important? So that's what we call nisbah. Let's look at the hadith. First of all, the hadith that he mentions, the wording that's used in Sahih Muslim is kullu amalin, every action, ibn Adam, of the son of Adam, of humanity, lahu, is for him, illa siyam, all actions are for the son of Adam. So when I eat, when I drink, when I pray, when I do hajj, this is for me, illa siyam, except fasting, fahuwa li, and it is for me, wa ana ajzi bihi, and I reward accordingly. That's the version that appears in Sahih Muslim. In another version, it explains it further. Is yad'u shahwatahu li ajli. It's the same version, same hadith, but it adds another phrase to it. Yad'u shahwatahu li ajli. The reason why it belongs to me is because he gives up his passions for my sake. That's why it's mine. And in the version that appears in Al-Bayhaqi, لِكُلِّ أَمَلٍ كَفَارَةٍ وَالصَّوْمُ لِي, that every action is a kafara. Kafara means that which covers up something else. So one of the reasons we pray, as I mentioned in the hadith earlier, is so that it wipes out the sins that we did. So alhamdulillah, we've just prayed here in the UK, we just prayed Dhuhr, and inshallah in a few hours time we'll pray Asr. When we pray Asr, hopefully it will wipe out all of the mistakes that I made in this dars and all of the things that I did wrong in between, because it's kafara. The zakat, inshallah, my zakat will be due in Ramadan, inshallah, and hopefully when I give my zakat, it will purify all of my wealth and will cover up all of the rubbish that I got up to in my job and in my life and in my work, chasing after the dunya, to get that money. And inshallah that will be kafara, except fasting. Fasting's not. This is Allah. This is for Allah. So that's what the narration of the hadith mentions. The narration of this by Bayhaqi. So in it you'll see, and here I'd like to for those particularly those grammarians amongst you, I'd like to just reflect on the something that I learned 2 years ago, roughly about this time in the month of Sha'ban 2 years ago, when I had the opportunity to sit in a one-to-one session with my teacher, Shaykh Afifuddin al-Jailani. May Allah preserve him and give him long life and benefit us by him. So again, I was visiting him in Sweden. He was traveling through Europe, and he mentioned this hadith, and he says the hadith, and he read the hadith, فَإِنَّهُ لِي, and indeed it is for me. He actually said that he'd heard from his teacher, Shaykh Abdul Karim Mudarris, that the dhamir, the pronoun, فَإِنَّهُ, and it is, actually refers to the fasting person. فَإِنَّهُ لِي, and not and it, meaning the fast, is mine. It means and he is mine. And he is mine. Now that's a beautiful statement, beautiful understanding. Why? Because what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying in this hadith is somebody gives up his fasting, gives up his food, gives up his drink, gives up all of those things, that person is mine. That's what Allah is saying. Innahu, who, that person, li. Not the fast is mine, innahu, that fasting person is mine. And that's something that I'd never come across in any of the commentaries on this hadith, but was opened up through the explanation of our Shaykh Afifuddin al-Jailani. Let's go back to the hadith. It says, "Kullu hasanatin bi'ashri amthaliha." Everything is by that will be rewarded by 10 times what you thought. Ila 700 ditfin, up to 700. So some people might ask. So that's the range. The range of reward is from 10 to 700. However, those numbers are just, I wouldn't say arbitrary, because that would be disrespectful to the hadith. Symbolic, I think, would be the right phrase. They're not fixed that if you fast, you get between, like if you think of it in monetary terms, if you invest £1, well, $1, you get $10 back, up to $700. No, it's not. There's not a direct correlation. Allah says in the Quran, "Walillahi wallahu yuda'if liman yasha." Allah will increase according to whatever way He wishes. And in another verse, is "Innama yuwaffa sabiruna bi ajrahum bighayri hisab." Allah will take up their reward, the rewards of the steadfast ones, bighayri hisab, without taking any account. And this verse is understood to refer to the people who fast. This verse is understood to refer to the people who fast. So in other words, the people who fast will be those who counted as patient ones. And what will their reward be? إِنَّمَا يُوَفَّى الصَّابِرُونَ أَجْرَهُمْ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. There won't be an account. It will be without a specific number. And then the verse, the hadith that I mentioned, that I would have used, as-sawm nisf sabr. And the reason why I often refer to that hadith, and Imam Al-Ghazali in the fuller version of the book Ihya Ulumuddin, he mentions this right at the beginning of the chapter. He mentions that fasting is a quarter of Iman. The quarter of this religion is fasting. And how does he get this figure? He says there's a hadith which is related by Tirmidhi, which says, as-sawm nisf sabr. Fasting or whole sense. It's to show these hadith where it says you get at 700 is not um, you can't limit Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's reward. And the best way to understand what reward you're going to get is that through another hadith where the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam describes the one that fasts. He has a door. There's a door specially for him, um, uh, especially for him, um, especially for him in the Jannah, which is called a Rayyan. So Rayyan is a door to the garden, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set an appointment for meeting the fasting person there. And so your reward is the meeting with your Lord. And that's why the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, للصائم فرحة عند إفطاره وفرحة عند لقاء ربه. Is the one is that he will have the he will have a joy, happiness when he fasts, when he breaks his fast, and he will have happiness um, when he meets his Lord. So, alhamdulillah, that's the meaning of the first hadith. The second hadith he mentions is لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ بَابٍ. Everything has a door. وَبَابُ الْعِبَادَةِ الصَّوْمُ. And that the door of fasting, the door of worship is fasting. So, what does this mean? Perhaps I'll quote here from one of the commentaries on the Ihya, where he says, the reason why لأنه يصفي الذهن, the reason why is fasting purifies the mind, it purifies, cleanses the mind, ويكون سببا لإشراق النور, and as a result of clearing the mind, it allows the light to enter على القلب, the light to rise upon the heart. فينشرح الصدر, and the breast opens up, the chest opens up, للعبادة, so that you're ready for worship. وتحصل الرغبة, and then what happens as a result of that is you have this desire to do worship. So fasting increases you, prepares you, and that's why it's called a bab. And then Imam Al-Ghazali, going back to the text, Imam Al-Ghazali says, إنما كان الصوم مخصوصا بهذه الخواص لأمرين. Fasting is singled out with these distinctions on two matters. The first of them is that it is essentially an act of abstention, which is practiced secretly. No one is aware of it other than Allah, unlike prayer, zakat, and other forms of worship. In other words, nobody can see, and we've already mentioned that. And the second is that it's an animosity. It's a weapon to fight against what he describes as Udu'ullah, the enemies of Allah. And that's shaitan, the nafs, the dunya. These are things which Allah dislikes. And as you are fighting them, you're fighting, therefore, you are siding yourself with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala against the things that Allah dislikes, and therefore you have this special nisbah, as we said earlier, this being attributed. And let me just read from the text exactly what Imam Al-Ghazali said. The second is that it is victory over Allah's enemy, and indeed, Satan is the enemy. He does not grow strong except by means of desires, and hunger breaks all the desires that are the tool of shaitan. So in other words, what you do in this month, in the month of Ramadan, in your fast, is that you go against what shaitan uses to lead you into doing bad things. That's to overcome your desire, is to have desire. He wants you to have desire, and as a result, going against those desires weakens his weapon. And for this reason, Allah's Messenger said, verily, Satan flows through the son of Adam like the flow of blood. So tighten the paths of Satan with hunger. It is also the secret of his statement, when Ramadan arrives, the gates of paradise are opened, the gates of hell are closed, devils are shackled, and an announcer calls, O seeker of good, come forth, O seeker of evil, desist. So here, that's the main part of what I wanted to cover from this text today. The next section of it talks about the three levels of fasting. It talks about those people, like us ordinary people, who fast the month of Ramadan and don't do anything else. And inshallah, that's sufficient. This is what not sufficient in the sense that Allah commanded us to do that. He says, "Kutiba alaykum as-siyam kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun," and then he goes, "Shahru Ramadan alladhi unzila fihi al-Quran hudan lin-nas wa bayinatin min al-huda faman shahida minkum ash-shahra falyusum." So whoever fasts, whoever witnesses the month of Ramadan, should fast. So therefore, that level is those people who are fulfilling the command to fast. And then there's a second level, which is the level of the person who fasts a sawm ad-dahr, the fast of a perpetual fast. Every day he fasts, and these people, actually the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam indicates, are actually not the best of people, not the best. The reason why is because they are best in one sense, but this is not the best fast. The reason why it's not the best fast is because they have la sama wala aftar. they don't feel the fast. They don't feel the soul. It just becomes a natural part of who they are, is to not eat. Whereas the best fast is actually the fast where you fast one day and you don't fast the next. You fast one day, you don't fast the next. And this is called the Psalm of Dawood, the fast of Dawood. Um, and then there's another level, which is the Mutawassit, that which is between the two, which is you fast the month of Ramadan and you do all of the Sunnah fast, like for example, Monday, Thursday, you fast on the ayam of the days of Hajj, the day of Arafah, sorry, you do on the day of Ashura, the 10th of Muharram, and the 6 days of Shawwal. And this is the second, this is the middle level. And inshallah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of the second level at least, and inshallah, give us the opportunity to fast the fast of David. That's the next section of the book, and I'm not reading word for word, but I paraphrase that. And then the last part of the principle is where Imam Al-Ghazali talks about three darajat, levels. وَأَمَّا دَرَجَاتِ أَسْرَارِهِ فَالثَّلَاثَةِ. There are three levels to the secrets of fasting, and inshallah, hopefully, perhaps we'll get an opportunity to look at these in a little more detail next week. And with this, I hand over the class back to our good friend and teacher and brother Khalid, who will open up, inshallah, for questions and answers, inshallah ta'ala.
MashaAllah. Thank you very much, Shaykh. Subhanallah, it was a very blessed class that we learned so much within an hour, I would say an hour and a half or a bit more. Alhamdulillah. Um, so much to recap. Just for information for anyone, in the evening just now, I was talking to Ibrahim from Warda Books. He mentioned to me that this book, currently which Abdul Aziz is using, the 40 principle on the Deen from Ihya Ulumuddin, the one that we are learning right now, currently out of print. So, inshallah, we wait for the publisher to, uh, you know, reprint again. Inshallah. But we have, alhamdulillah, benefit from Shabdaz's class, despite that the book is out of print, but we have a living knowledge with us now. Subhanallah. Okay, there are quite a number of questions coming in pertaining to fasting, but I would like to touch the one that is very severe. I would consider it severe as a man. It was something to do. He openly said something like he is addicted to some pornography, and he find it difficult to control his desire. And every time, not every time, he didn't mention every time, but whenever he's in Ramadan, like last year, I guess, he find it difficult because he said that Ramadan is not only fasting, but every actions that involve with it, include in the fasting. So he said, how would you advise him to deal with it in this coming Ramadan?
Okay, this is a very good question, very important question, and it reminds me of somebody who, a number of people, but one sister in particular, put this question to me shortly before Ramadan, that she was addicted to drugs, um, and she Ramadan is the worst time of her life, she was indicating, and the reason why was because she knew that that it hit her more in Ramadan than any other time, and that's when we look at the hadith of the bab. Ibad is Sawm, the
Yeah.
door is fasting, is that she felt this more in Ramadan. And so we talked a little bit about this before Ramadan, and said, no, what you should do is you should look at Ramadan as an opportunity to overcome the, the drug habit, and that you should look at it that these are actually a number of hours where you are focusing on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the drugs should be something which it's an opportunity for you to train in the same way that I've just talked about imsak, holding back. This is a chance for you to learn self-restraint. And I know, I mean, I've worked with many drug people who are involved in drug addicts, alhamdulillah, most of them, many of them managed to get out of it, but it's not, it can't happen overnight. It doesn't happen overnight. But if you come to the month of Ramadan with the idea that I'm going to use Ramadan to help me control this habit, to overcome this habit by focusing on the benefits of imsak, holding back for these specific times. So alhamdulillah, she decided she was going to try to fast, and that she was going to try and not eat, drink, or take any drugs for half a day. And this was in the days
inshallah.
where our fast in the UK was 20 hours. So she was going to fast for 9 hours without eating, drinking, or taking drugs. Alhamdulillah, she did the first day, and she decided that rather than just do the 9 hours, she may as well just go to Asr. And alhamdulillah, she made it to Maghrib. After
Inshallah.
and she said it was one of the best days of her life. Why? Because she'd actually managed to overcome something. And she didn't uh, overcome the habit, so to speak, in one day or 1 week or 1 month. It took some time, and but that was the starting point. So if there's this brother, or and there are many people, it's not just
Mhm.
him. This is a very, very common situation. Takes this month of Ramadan as an opportunity, like that sister, to take part of the day, and then hopefully the whole day, to avoid doing haram. It, and in Singapore, if it's a Singaporean situation, the days are actually very relatively short. Doing the whole day, it should be fine. And hopefully that one day, then 2 days, then 3 days, and then slowly that person will start to be able to get control. And once they know that I can control, they've actually got halfway over the battle. And they will slip. I think people slip. That's part of addiction. So hopefully they can use it as part of their way of recovering from their addiction, whatever that addiction may be. And this particular addiction is a very difficult one, and a very common one. And I suspect it might actually become more difficult as people are more locked away, and become more lonely and isolated. And may Allah protect all men and women from this.
I mean, thank you, Shay, for sharing the story and giving us the idea or the way to find a way out for such addictions or problems that we are facing mentally and spiritually. How about anger, Shay? I also received some questions on anger. I try to rephrase, like in Ramadan, sometimes a lot of things trigger, maybe family or work or even friends. So, how appropriately we should deal with our anger in the month of Ramadan, and how does it help us in any other month when it comes to anger?
Okay, first, to go back to the hadith that we just mentioned earlier in the dars, was that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, when
Salam.
somebody comes to argue with you and they want to start a fight with you, and this is usually there's a trigger to your anger. When that trigger comes, when somebody comes to you, say, inni sa'im, I am fasting, I am fasting. What does this mean? You speak to yourself first, I can control myself. I
Mhm.
can control myself. And then you say to the other person, I am fasting. Inni sa'im, inni sa'im. So first thing is that hadith and nafs is telling yourself, I can control this. I don't need to do this. There are alternative strategies using
Yeah.
psychobabble. Uh, so okay, let's use the language of psychology. There is a trigger to anger. Recognizing the trigger and then saying to yourself, there are strategies to deal with this trigger. And there, one of those strategies is to say, I can control this. I'm walking away. Okay, so that's so it's actually a way. The fast should be a means by which you start to learn new strategies to deal with anger. And fasting is a great strategy. Finding that peace, and remembering actually there's a better way to deal with this. The remembering the calmness that you feel just before Maghrib, and comparing that to the way that you feel when you've just lost your temper and you've lost it and you've given in to those triggers. Compare those two. Which one is the better one? Which one do I want? Which one do I seek in my life? Do I want tranquility, or do I want perpetually fighting myself? And inshallah, with Allah's help, we'll get there.
Yes, thank you, Shaykh, for the advice and the knowledge. Next question, Shaykh. Also try to rephrase a few questions. Seems to be alike in regards to those who are sick and unable to fast in Ramadan. Dear Shaykh, I feel down for the past 2 years on Ramadan because I was diagnosed with diabetes and I'm struggling with my health. And I'm so used to fast in Ramadan throughout my life. And I'm now 43 years old. And now I've been told that I could not fast again this year because of my diabetes. What advice you have for me in terms to my spiritual morality? Yeah.
Okay, there's a few things here. The first one is to remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the diabetes. This is from Allah. It's not from the doctor. It's not from the sugar. It's not from it's not. This is Allah's plan. Allah gave you diabetes, and therefore, if this is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you should embrace it with your hands open and say that alhamdulillah, Allah has given me diabetes. And that state of accepting Allah gave me diabetes might be better than the 40 years of fasting that you did. So that's the first point, is remember that that's the key thing, is to accept Allah has given me this. And once you start to accept that, you'll see the life in a completely different way. First thing. Second thing, because He gave you that, He also gave you alternatives. So it says, وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُرِيدُ ومن كان من كان على سفر أو فمن كان مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخرى. Whoever is sick or unable to, فعدة من أيام أخرى. He should do it on other days, and then also it also describes. So this is if you aren't able to fast, then you intend to fast on the days which you are able to, because Allah might take away the diabetes, might take away the illness. And I remember the first day that I became ill, just as cold, and missing the fast, the pain and the heaviness that it felt. But actually, the fact that illness was from Allah, and as a result, it taught me that the blessing of fasting out of the month of Ramadan is also there. And in the case in the UK, where, like I say, alhamdulillah, it's getting shorter now, but with those days that I referred to earlier, where we were fasting 19 hours, 20 hours, they're really, really very quite difficult physically. And it's a great strain on a lot of people. However, if they're unable to, because they're too weak, they're not well enough to do it, Allah's given us this opportunity, if they're unwell, that they can leave it till the winter. And our hours in winter are very short, 12 hours, 11 hours of fasting. So this is a means of ease for you. And how does He finish this whole section of Quran? يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرَ وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْعُسْرَ. He doesn't want to give you ease, difficulty. He wants to give you ease. So if you're able to fast on a later time, then Allah's given you bliss. And if not, فَفِدْيَةُ طَعَامِ مِسْكِينٍ. That if you're not able to fast, then you have the opportunity to feed the poor. And that feeding of the poor is another gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I can't feed the poor as a fidya, because inshallah I'm strong enough to fast. But however, Sarah has been given that opportunity to do fidya, because she's not physically well enough, and because of her condition, it's highly unlikely she will ever be. So she's been given this opportunity to feed the poor. And alhamdulillah, last year, 2 or 3 people that needed to feed the poor, I pulled all of their money together, and we sent it to one particular village in Africa, and they fed everybody, and the whole town was fed.
Inshallah.
So this is a blessing that only this sister or brother with diabetes might be able to be given. So these are things you should the attitude you should take, and you should still take advantage of the month of Ramadan. Inshallah, you'll be able to read Quran, you'll be able to pray, you'll be able to do all of these things and get extra reward. And the fast that you miss, you'll be rewarded as well. And just as a final point on that, I remember a sister who is the complete opposite, the reverse. When she had is it type 2 diabetes that you might get as a child. She had the diabetes as a child, and she's diabetic all her life. She'd been on insulin from childhood, and then she became Muslim as a teenager, and then alhamdulillah in her 30s or 40s she'd never fasted, and then but she made dua. She made every single Ramadan. She would cry and make dua. Oh Allah, remove my diabetes, and alhamdulillah, Allah granted her a miracle. And in her late 30s or early 40s, I think she did Hajj, um, and miraculously Allah Subhanahu wa Taala changed the metabolism and her body and everything, and she was granted this opportunity to fast. And that fast that she fasted when I can't imagine how happy she must have been. Likewise, the sister who was overcoming her drug addiction. This is real happiness. This is real joy. So don't be put off. You can find real joy in Ramadan, despite your difficulties.
MashaAllah, Shaykh. What a amazing insight you give us and how to prioritize the situation we are in and the story that you share. May Allah ease your wife and those who are sick. Inshallah. I mean, Syed, this is the last question because we have been ongoing from just now. You're very tired, I am sure. And inshallah, we continue next week. Another session with Syed on the same book, and you can ask questions. And those which question are not being asked today, I'm not forgetting. I'm not going to forget about it. I will ask you next week, inshallah. So, Syed, this is a very important question because I guess such people are always neglected. Especially in Ramadan, those who are actually facing like family issues, marriage, and spouse issues. So I also rephrase because there's two questions. So I rephrasing it. He said, Shay, how do we endure difficulties in our marriage when husband and wife are not talking to each other? And another case is abuse in Ramadan. So it's like the way how she and or he is saying is that in Ramadan, when you are going through these trials, it's difficult for you to focus on the goal of Ramadan, like fastings, other forms of ibadah. So it affect this person so much that and she is in a depressive state. So what's your advice for this? Yeah.
Um, when there's strife between couples, this inshallah hopefully will be an opportunity, because as the hadith says, وَأَوَّلُهُ رَحْمَةٌ, the beginning of this month is a month of rahmah, is rahmah, and this is a month in which Quran descended as a rahmah. So it might be that inshallah the month of Ramadan, you look at it as a potential mercy for these situations, and make dua, ask and ask and ask and ask. But in the end, mercy can come in different ways, and we shouldn't be scared to acknowledge that sometimes things don't work, and that sometimes the mercy can be in a divorce, or sometimes the mercy can be in leaving an abusive situation, abusive relationship, because in some ways you can't move forward unless you have a level of peace. You have to have a minimum level of peace to be able to take advantage. And part of that mercy might be getting that level of peace that's required for you to move on. And I know from experience and from people around me that sometimes the best situation is actually where you need to leave that to find that peace. And if that's in Allah's plan, then don't be scared. I'm not saying that everybody should just give up on a marriage or give up on a relationship, but in the end, you need to examine and examine and examine. Try to make dua for the mercy. Look at ways of trying to find a way forward. But in the end, if it's not if it isn't bringing peace, then it's difficult to move forward without that peace. And that's why there's a difference between marital difficulties and domestic abuse. Everybody goes through marital difficulties. That's part of marriage. You can't have two people put together without some kind of difficulty. It's the nature of human beings. However, that and in most cases of marital difficulties, you can resolve them in most cases. However, domestic abuse is something which is different, and I think my understanding is well known. My position is well known that domestic abuse is not acceptable under any circumstances, and that men should never hit women. And if that is happening, then women should act in a way that they should know that they have rights to be protected, to move out of a situation which is harmful to their physical and mental and spiritual well-being. And we ask Allah to protect us during this month of Ramadan and
Amin.
every month and every day, and
Amin.
protect those people that are going through tribulations,
Amin.
whether they are on a wide, large political scale, like our brothers and sisters in different parts of the world, or,
Amin.
or on an individual level in our homes where we're facing trials and tribulations in our relationships, or within ourselves facing difficulties with addiction, um, or challenges with our lower self. We ask God to give us victory and success. Fatahul Alim Sallallahu Alaihi
Amin. Thank you, Shaykh Abdul Aziz, once again for the Dars online, which is, I'm pretty sure, positively sure, had benefited all of us across the world. And may Allah preserve you in good health. So, everyone, inshallah, next Sunday we'll be online again with Abdul Aziz at the same time. But also remember tomorrow and a few days coming, we also have different sheikhs and ustad who will be online on this page also. With this, I say Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Peace be upon you. May Allah bless us and forgive us.
Wasallam. Ameen. Wassalamu alaikum.
Salam.